Hey, kids, bit of a change of pace this week. I'm over talking about overthinking. I'm giving some good advice. I'm talking about the great Billy Connolly, and I'm sharing some new music because the world is opening up, kids. We're coming back online. And I'll tell you all about it on the other side.
Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay.
Franco is pretty smart, but Franco is a child. And when it comes to the day of the contest, I am his father. He comes to me for advices. So, it's not that hard for me to give him the wrong advices. Name the movie, kids. Can you name the movie? Can you name the documentary film from which I took that little clip? Now, that was not the actual clip. That was not the actual movie. That was just me being me. But who can name the film? Who can name the film? Is it you? Is it you? You in the back. Pumping Iron. Yes, guy. Pumping Iron, the 1977 documentary film prepared and filmed about the 1975 Mr. Olympia contest, which brought to the public consciousness a 28-year-old Austrian bodybuilder called Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that was probably Arnold playing his best role, man, which was Arnold himself. Charismatic, confident, too confident, actually. Downright cocky. And now, if you watch the film, you think, man, Arnold is as full of himself as it gets. And he probably was. But full disclosure, there was a lot of setups in this movie. There was a lot of stuff that was filmed to create drama, all right? Because bodybuilding in itself... not all that interesting to look at, man. So they had a bunch of set pieces in this film. You had Arnold and Franco, and they would be working with a ballerina to work on their body movements and their posing. And I don't know if they actually did this or not. Maybe they did. But visually, it's funny, and it gives you something to look at other than just dudes pumping in the gym, right? And so they had to build characters into this movie. And Arnold was the star, but we also had Franco Columbo, who we've talked about before, the Sardinian Superman, and we had Lou Ferrigno, better known to most of you as the Incredible Hulk himself. I once stood beside Lou Ferrigno at the 2010 Mr. Olympia contest in Las Vegas, Nevada. Lou was there among other luminaries. He had a little booth. You could go meet the Hulk. And if you spent some money, you could talk to the Hulk, and we weren't feeling like doing that. But we did stand beside him, kind of peripherally. And I got a funny picture of my wife, my little wife standing beside. She's an average size, but Lou Ferrigno is a giant, right? He's like 6'5". At that point in time, he's not Lou anymore. He's not 300 pounds of Lou. But he's still a giant dude, and it's just funny to see that. So Lou was in that movie. And Franco and Arnold and Ken Waller. It was the Mike Katz and Serge Nubret. It was most of the luminaries of the golden age of bodybuilding, which was 1970s, Venice Beach, Muscle Beach, LA, Santa Monica, California, sun-kissed bodybuilders in the surf. And Arnold came to prominence in that movie. And one of the reasons was speeches like, it's not that hard for me to give him the wrong advices. This charismatic anti-hero, hero/villain, Arnold, man. But I feel like I haven't done a lot of the motivational stuff lately, man. Haven't given you a lot of the other side of this coin that we call the JHB. Talking a lot of music, haven't talked a lot of motivation. And I don't know why, it's just the way it goes sometimes, man. There is no program here in terms of a long-term kind of strategy. And some people in the podcast development world would come along and say, look, man, you need a plan. You got to schedule all this out, and you got to do this and you got to do that. And when I was doing interviews, I kind of did, you know. That always depends on the whim of the interviewee and the availability. But I could think episodes in advance, you know. These days with the solo format, much different, much more fly-by-night, man. So I come into this at the beginning of the week and I record and then I release the episode into the world. And a few days later, I begin thinking again. All right, what's the next thing gonna be? What's coming into my world? What's coming into prominence around me? What's coming into my imagination? What's coming into my consciousness that might be worth talking about? Lately, it hasn't been a lot of motivation, but in the last week, I had 2 opportunities online to share one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever been given. And I thought maybe now's the time to jump just a little bit back into that personal development world and talk about advices. And so immediately when I think of advice, I go to Arnold. And that little clip at the beginning provides what we call a hook, kids. We talked a lot about hooks. Can't seem to do musical hooks, can't seem to do melodic hooks. But man, I can do podcast hooks. And we're going to talk about advices. Now, Arnold, you know, I can give Franco the wrong advices. Take what you want from that. That was a character in a documentary, an avatar of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Last week, in my travels, I don't spend a lot of time online anymore, kids. In fact, I'm trying to figure out a way to have a podcast and market it without being on social media at all. Throughout the COVID thing, social media has begun to grate on me, man. And there have been stuff going on. There's been things happening where I look around, particularly at the comments on social media posts, and you just kind of lose the will to live. You lose faith in humanity, man, when you see the trolls at work and when you see some of the ways that people are thinking out there. It just becomes exhausting, man. And I often wonder, is social media worth being a part of anymore? I spent a lot of time in the last week listening to lectures and reading blog posts about people who left social media and why. And it makes a lot of freaking sense to me, man. Because it's fearful, and it's anxiety-inducing, and it makes you crumble, and it makes you just lose your faith, man. And so the great lesson there is, hey, dude, don't read comments anymore. Oh! That's a great notion. And if I had some sort of discipline or self-control, maybe I could do that. But social media is designed to engage and hook and addict, man. They got teams of people whose job it is to figure out how they can make social media even more addictive to the people using it. They want you on the platform 24/7, man. And they make it addictive. They give you those dopamine hits. And the longer they can keep you engaged on their platform, the more money it becomes worth. And I'm going to say something right now that people need to understand. The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil, all right? The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. Let's just clarify that right now, okay? Just a little aside. So I've been trying to extract myself from social media, but in my travels last week, in my inability to detach myself entirely from social media, I had a couple of opportunities to share advices. There are a couple of posts out there that said, what's the best advice you've ever been given? And I posted something like that a year or so ago on my Facebook, and the most prominent answer seemed to be, don't eat the yellow snow. Good advice, not what I was looking for. So I have not subsequently posted anything like that on Facebook, But I thought, what is the best advice you've ever been given? And I haven't been given a lot of advice, if I'm perfectly honest, that I remember. But there's one piece of advice, two advices that I'm going to give you that are both on the same line, okay? Now, the first came to me from the great Jerry Gaskill himself. Jerry Gaskill, drummer for King's X, the drummer in my favorite band of all time. So I trundled over to Mount Clemens, Michigan some years ago to see King's X play this really great theater over there. I forget the name of the theater, but it was a cool space, man. It had like a balcony, floor seating, whatever, all that stuff. It was a theater, a theater like they used to be. And it was a great show. I sat in the balcony, which is rarity. Usually you want to be kind of up front, but I felt like I had this vantage point on Jerry from up in the balcony, right? So I could watch the man do what he does, and what he does is freaking great. Then after the show, King's X is super duper about doing meet and greet kinds of things. Some bands, you want to meet the band, you got to pay $200 for that extra ticket, or $300 or $500 or $1,000 for that extra ticket to go backstage and meet the band. But King's X is such that they play venues where they can just come out, man. So they leave the stage and everybody's milling about and the show's over and it was great. And then, 20 minutes or half an hour later, the band will come out and they'll sit at the merch table and they'll do their selfies and they'll sign things and they'll chat with you. And I've done that a few times and it's great to chat with your favorite band, my friends. It's a great thing to do. So I'm sitting there and, full disclosure, one of my biggest problems as a drummer is I'm not great at playing the bass drum, all right? Not great on the kick pedal, and there are reasons for that, and I'm working it out. But Jerry Gaskill's got a great right foot, man. He's one of these one drum, one kick players, all right? No double pedal, none of that stuff, no two kick drums. Jerry plays one foot, one pedal, one drum. And he's got a great freaking right foot, and I'm jealous of that, man. But you got to put aside your jealousies, kids, sometimes because you need the information. So it comes to my turn in line, and I talk to Doug. Doug's usually first in line. And it's great to chat with Doug, and I once interviewed Doug, and that was great. And then it comes to Jerry, man. And I says, hey, Jerry, what's your best piece of advice on playing the kick drum pedal? And Jerry looks at me, shared this connection, eyeball to eyeball, and he says, man, hit it with your foot. Hit it with your foot, kids. Just hit it with your foot. Now, that seems like a flippant kind of answer, and probably it was. Jerry's a funny guy. Ty Tabor sitting beside him laughing about it all. And okay, that's a joke, but there is serious subtext there if you want to read it, all right? There is profundity. Just hit it with your foot. Dude, stop thinking so hard about it and hit it with your foot. Perform the basic function. Because I'd be sitting there and there'd be a thing I want to play and I want to use the slide technique or the heel toe technique or the swivel technique. Does my pedal board need to be elevated? Is my spring too tight? You can think yourself in freaking circles, man, trying to figure out how to make the pedal go faster when Jerry would say, dude, just hit it with your foot. Don't overthink it, man. You've got paralysis by analysis. Just hit it with your foot. And that comes to mind every time somebody says to me, what's your best piece of advice? What's the best advice you've ever been given? I got another example of that, kids, Because you say, well, you can't really take advice from superstars. They live in a different world. Well, how about my boy Clugger then? Clugger, who's no longer with us, gave me another one of the great pieces of advice of all time, and it's in the same line. Now, one day he and I are out on the golf course, right? And we're hitting the ball around. He was a natural gifted athlete. Dude could play anything, could knock the ball out of the park, could hit a golf ball a country freaking mile. Not a big guy, just had that athleticism. It's about athleticism, kids. It's about hand-eye coordination. It's about smooth movement. Me, I'm out there hacking around like I'm beating a buzzard to death. He's just got this easy loping swing, Hits it a freaking mile. So we tee off on this one hole, and he's in the middle of the fairway somewhere, which he usually was. And I'm in a fairway sand trap, which I often am. And so what's the shot on the golf course, kids? that makes you think the most? Okay, you could say it's a putt. You got a long putt, you got to read the green, you got to bend it around corners. But I don't think that fills you with the kind of trepidation that a fairway or a greenside bunker will give you. Because you walk into that, and all of these swing thoughts, come into your head. We got to take a bunch of sand, put the ball back in your stance, you got to do this, you got to open up the club face, you got to this, you got to have, you're holding up the grass and letting the wind blow it away, as if you're going to actually hit the ball far. You're in a fairway bunker, man. So I'm standing in this bunker and I got a club in my hand, and I don't know if it's the right club. I'm not a good golfer, okay? And Clugger's standing in the fairway beside me as I stand over this ball, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I stood there for probably longer than I should have, and the whole course is backed up for miles, with people getting ready to throw things at me. And I looked up at him and I'm like, I don't know what to do here. And what was his answer, kids? What was his response? He says, just hit it. Just hit it. Just hit it, man. Stop thinking so freaking hard and just hit the ball. So I swung and I hit the ball. I don't remember what happened, but pretty sure it went out of the bunker. May have gone in the lake, may have gone in the woods, but it came out of the bunker. And it was the same advice, man. Just hit it with your foot. Just hit the ball. Stop overthinking. I'm a chronic overthinker, man. It's one of my vices. It's one of the thorns in my side. And maybe you do that too. I don't know. But I'm talking about it now because we're about to re-enter the world, man. And I find myself in a position right now where all options are on the table and it feels like everything's falling apart. I'm unemployed. Music is shut down. The acts that I play with have mostly moved far away, not really writing anything. Apart from this podcast, I'm not really doing much at all, and I wanna, And maybe you're in this position too right now, where maybe work ain't what it used to be, or maybe work is gone, or maybe whatever the projects you were working on are gone because of the COVID. But we're beginning to come back to life, and we're reaching a point where people can begin to think about doing stuff again. And if you're like me, that can cause freaking anxiety, man. If you're like me, that can cause you to sit there spinning and overthinking instead of doing. Now, I get dozens of emails and dozens of private messages every week from the folks out there, the faithful, and they write to me and they say, hey, man, they say, how do you do a podcast? How do you start? How do you do it, man? What equipment do I need, and what microphone, and what software should I use, and what should I talk about, and when I'm scheduling interviews, what should I do? And then when somebody agrees to an interview, how I set the, and then they spin out of control. And what platform should I use to post it, and how do I monetize it? That's like the second question everybody has. How do I start a podcast, and then how do I monetize it? I got 2 episodes out. Why am I not making any freaking money yet? And my answer is to stop thinking about so hard. You know what? When I interviewed Denny Boy, I think it was episode 3 maybe of the show way back in the interview days, sat down with Denny, who is a fully, at least pre-COVID, was a fully independent musician. That was his job. That was his life. Raising a family on that, kids, making it work, because it's possible to do, or at least it was, and it will be again. I says to Denny, how do you do it? How do you make it as an independent musician and make a living? And he says, well, you do it. You do it. You do it. Away with the grand strategy, man. Away with things needing to be perfect. You just do it. You hit it with your foot. You just hit the ball. You just do it, man. And so it got me thinking about overthinking. It got me overthinking about overthinking. And you can't necessarily take my word on it, I'm not a trained psychologist. I see one regularly, but I ain't one myself. I can speak the language a little bit, but I'm kind of an imposter. I've got my own experience and I can speak from that. But I went out and I thought I would consult the experts on this. And I took a look at why do we overthink things so much, man? And I found some interesting research and some interesting psychology on this concept of overthinking. Because a lot of us do it, man. And why do we do it? Well, we do it because we want to feel like we're in control of something. Especially if you are prone to anxiety. Anxiety tends to be a fear about the future. Anxiety tends to be a fear about the things that we cannot control. So if you're facing this decision, right? If you're facing a new project that you don't know how to start or whether to start, or a job change or whatever, there's a lot there that you do not control, man. And so one of the ways to feel as though you do is to sit and think and spin about it. It's a feeling of being in control. I'm thinking about this, I'm doing the groundwork here. I'm thinking about it. Thinking about starting a podcast. Don't know how to do that. A little bit afraid of it. Don't even know if I want to. And I'm going to think about it, which makes me feel like I'm in control in some way, right? And then some people are like, they overthink it because they want it to be perfect, man. It happens sometimes. There are slick podcasts that come out. And right from episode 1, it's consistent and it's high quality, and it's there. It's fully realized right off the bat. But I gotta tell you, those are rare podcasts, man. If you go back to any podcast, basically any podcast that's existed for a long time, that's done 50, 60, 70, 1,000 episodes, you go back and listen to those first ones, you're not going to find the same level as you're likely to find in the later ones. Everything is a process, man. Everything is an evolution. And I still toy sometimes with taking down the first 47 or so of my episodes. And I'm not even sure about 48. But the evolution, not just in the content of this program, but in the way it's delivered, is remarkable, man. And I go back sometimes because I'm looking for stuff that I've done before, because I don't want to repeat it, or maybe I want to update it. And I'll go back and I'll listen to a couple of things and I'll just freaking cringe, man. Now, if I had not started the show because I wanted it to be perfect, I never would have done it, man. And you could argue that that would have been no great loss to the world. But whatever you're getting out of this now probably wasn't there in the beginning. And it needed a process of evolution. Everything is a process of evolution, man. But if you're afraid to do the thing, you might just sit there and overthink it instead of doing it. And that's another thing that this provides, man. Thinking about doing it in lieu of actually doing it. It all comes down to a fear. A fear of doing it wrong. A fear of making the wrong decision, man. A fear of screwing it up. And what are the consequences for screwing it up? Well, with a podcast like this, not much, man. Not much. The consequences, generally speaking, are never quite as bad as you project that they could be. If you're an overthinker, chances are you're prone to anxiety, and anxiety people tend to also be prone to catastrophizing, right? And so it's always a worst case scenario kind of thing. So instead of actually putting the product into the world, instead of actually writing the thing or recording the music, right? Or doing the art or going for the job or thinking about going to school, instead of doing all of that and doing it wrong or doing it imperfectly or making the wrong decision, we'll sit here and we'll think about it. We'll think about how we might do it. Now, there's a certain amount of that is constructive, okay? You're going to start a podcast, you're going to record some music. It might be smart to spend some time thinking about what you want that to be. That's a constructive part of the creative process. But if you sit there for 5 years, just thinking about it from all the different angles, you're probably avoiding, okay? But it makes you feel like you're actually doing the thing. Makes you feel like you're making the podcast if you're spending all your time thinking about it and making notes about it. I have behind me on my bookshelf a row of books about the First World War, okay? And I got in notebooks around the house reams of notes about the First World War. Why? Because I had an idea for a film. All right, I wanted to write a screenplay around the First World War. Now, there's a lot to know, okay? If you want a script about the war to be authentic, there's a lot of details, all right? And you must do your research, but at a certain point, the research is no longer beneficial, man. At a certain point, you got to get down to writing the dang script. And if you're afraid to write the script, or if you realize that despite all your research, you don't really have a story, then the way to feel like you're still doing it, you haven't let go of the dream, you're still holding on to this thing, well, is to think about it. Do more research, you know? And so I spent 10 years doing research for a script that never got written. And it may at some point, or it may not, you know, but overthinking is a really clever way to feel like you're doing a thing without actually having to take the risk and do the dang thing, man. And what if you're overthinking because that's what you think you do? You know, we have beliefs about ourselves. You know, we have patterns that emerge in our lives over time. So if you were a kid and you overthought a decision one time my mom gave me some Donkey Kong stickers. Beautiful Donkey Kong stickers, you know, back in the 80s. And I was a little kid and I liked those stickers so freaking much that I never stuck them anywhere. Because I didn't want to stick them in the wrong place, man. So even as a kid, I was an overthinker about stuff like that. A kid who's not too self-conscious, you know, a kid who isn't too worried about what people think. People who don't attach a lot of sentimentality to things. Just put those stickers on a notebook, man, and job done. And your mom feels good because you used the stickers. Well, here I am. The stickers are so precious to me that I won't put them on anything because I don't want to put them on the wrong thing. And how does that repeat itself over time? How does this inability to make your own decision, how does this inability to trust your own intuition on things play itself out over time? And then it becomes a habit and a pattern and a belief about yourself. Oh, I'm a chronic overthinker. How many times have you said that, man? Thoughts become things, kids. I'm a chronic overthinker. And then that becomes your reaction to freaking everything. Everything you do, you chronically overthink. You can't decide what to get off a freaking menu. Well, that looks good. Well, that looks good too. Well, I don't want to make the wrong decision. Or what color of sweater to buy. All of these things come into your life and becomes a belief about yourself. Well, I'm an overthinker. I overthink everything. Do you though? And is that a learned behavior? Is that innate to you, or is that just something you attach to? Is that just something you identify with, man? The overthinking is a problem, okay? A little bit of it's natural, right? There's stuff out there that is a risk. There's stuff out there that's a bit scary. And if you don't know 100% what you're doing, it can be intimidating to do a thing or to make a decision, you know? And we are so disconnected from our intuition anymore. We are so disconnected from our gut. We think our way through freaking everything, and we think about how people are going to react to it. So many of our decisions are informed by a perception of how other people will react. And then you get older and you realize two things. A, almost nobody gives a crap about anything you do. B, if they have a problem with what you do, chances are the problem is about them and not you, man. Ultimately, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't freaking matter. But it takes time to come to that realization, all right? The problem is, if you identify as an overthinker and this becomes your life, you set yourself up to not actually do anything, including the things you want to do and you should do. To try the things you want to try and should try. Because they will unlock your potential, because they will just be fun for you, man. Because they may be a key to your dharma. I don't want to go all dharma on you. But you got to try things sometimes to figure out what you actually like and don't like, or are good at, or want to be good at, you know? And so you sit there developing this attitude that you're an overthinker and you don't do things and you're afraid to do things, and that leads to a kind of anxiety because you feel like you can't do anything, like you can't escape your own freaking thoughts and just do. So you develop this anxiety, or you develop this depression because you're not doing whatever it is you want to try to do. I'm overthinking it instead of doing it. And you become depressed because you want to do this thing, but you're not, or you feel like you can't, or you feel like you can't escape this script that runs in your head that says you're an overthinker. So you're risking anxiety, you're risking depression, you're risking not fulfilling your real potential, you're risking not having the thing that you want, you're risking not doing the thing that you may have been born to do, man. Overthinking is a way to avoid pain, but it also causes pain, man. So if you find yourself in this position right now where you know you're overthinking a thing, remember the wisdom of Jerry Gaskill. Just hit it with your foot, man. Remember the wisdom of Clugger standing on the golf course. Just hit it, dude. Just hit it. Just hit it with your foot. Just do the thing. Take the simple step. Take the logical, take the direct approach, man. If you want to make a podcast, make a freaking podcast. Hit record and do the freaking podcast. It does not have to be perfect. The songs you want to write do not have to be perfect. There's a reason why they call it the first draft. There's a reason why God created editing, okay? Whatever it is that you're overthinking, step back. Think about why you're overthinking, and then don't get caught up in thinking about why you're overthinking. What are you afraid of? Step into it, man. Just hit it with your foot. Just hit it. And I think that'll help you out, all right, kids? And all of that leads me, I hope you stayed with me through all of that, and I hope it was helpful. But it leads me to a documentary program, Not the Pumping Iron, a different documentary that I watched on the weekend. And this is Billy Connolly, It's Been a Pleasure. Billy Connolly is my favorite comedian on planet Earth. If you don't know Billy, you probably should. You definitely should, and you probably do, I suspect. Billy Connolly is a Scottish comedian, a freaking legend, one of the most beloved comedians in the history of Britain and Scotland and the UK and all that stuff. And, you know, a contemporary of Robin Williams and all of the English guys that you love so much, you know, the Monty Python folks. Billy Connolly is, what do I say? Just one of the great all-time comedians and success stories. And there's a documentary that's come out about his life and his career recently. It's called Billy Connolly, It's Been a Pleasure. And the reason that's come out is because Billy Connolly retired from public performance in the past couple of years due to complications from Parkinson's disease. And that is freaking sad, man. Billy's in his 70s now. He's been around a long freaking time, had a 50-year career in showbiz. As an actor, if you've ever seen Mrs. Brown, Billy Connolly played in Mrs. Brown and a bunch of other movies. He was in one of the Hobbit movies. He played one of the Dwarf Kings. It's probably in the third one, yeah, Battle of Five Armies. Really extremely funny and gregarious, man. And he is a compelling story, man. Now, Billy Connolly grew up Glasgow, Scotland in like the 60s, 50s. Rough times, poverty, abandoned by his parents, you know, abused, had a very extremely difficult life. Billy Connolly was working in the shipyards of Glasgow. Can you imagine what an environment that must have been, man? That will quite literally test your mettle. And Billy Connolly was a welder, you know, one of these rough guys, early 20s, working in the shipyards of Glasgow at a time when that was a rough place to be, man. But he had in his mind the dream to be a folk singer. Born performer, Billy Connolly. And so he began performing on the folk circuit, such as it was. And he was in a duo called the Humble Bums. And they played around and they did okay. I think they put out a record, this kind of folk music. But a funny thing happened, all right? And this is why you got to just hit it, you know what I mean? Because what happened was the Humble Bums broke up and Billy was performing solo, but he would begin to do these introductions to his songs and he would tell stories, right? And the stories were freaking hilarious. The man is a natural born, compelling, very funny storyteller. And eventually people would be reacting way more to the story than they were to the music. And at a certain point, it was realized, Billy, you should just tell the stories. And so he made this transition from folk singer into comedian. And from there, history was made, all right? This is like the 70s. He was like 30s. He was not super duper young when this transition happened. And he began to perform as just a comedian, and he was brilliant. Billy Connolly didn't practice. You look at somebody like Seinfeld, who is a technician, right? Seinfeld writes the joke down. Seinfeld practices the joke. He's a craftsman of the finest order, Billy Connolly, quite a different thing. Now, he'd have some idea in his head about what he might go out and talk about. And then he would just walk out on stage and this switch would flip. And he wouldn't write things down. And he wouldn't practice. He didn't craft the jokes. He just went out and was Billy Connolly. And apparently he'd be a basket case before he went on stage for that reason. Is the gift gonna show up tonight? Sure hope so, because there's 1,000 people out there waiting for it. Man, you talk about living on a knife edge. You talk about putting yourself under the pressure. No overthinking there, man. Just walk out and do the thing. And, Billy Connolly was so funny. Here's the highest endorsement. I've seen him live twice, all right? And my wife, who is not a laugher at comedians at all, has freaking tears rolling down her face at Billy Connolly, all right? And there's a reason for that, okay? It's not just his really charming Scottish Glaswegian accent. That doesn't hurt. And it's not just that he works blue. And it's not just that he's a really gifted and funny storyteller. There is in Billy Connolly, and there still is, even with Parkinson's disease, an incredible and infectious joy. Arnold had that too, by the way. You read people's tributes to Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the golden age of bodybuilding, and they will talk about this joy that Arnold had. And Billy Connolly has that joy too. There is a twinkle in his eye that he loves life and he loves the absurdity of life. And he experienced, man, all right, he experienced it. This is an abused kid, grew up in a very rough and tumble world, had his own issues, mental health, substances, what I mean? Had at times a very difficult life. And it got to him and it wore on him, man. But he had a way of alchemizing those experiences into comedy. And he had an outlet for it through comedy. And he had a gift like few people have ever had to just turn stuff into funny. And he would just walk out on stage and he would do that for 2 hours, man. The first time I saw him perform, it went on for freaking ever. At a certain point, somebody showed him the time or something. He's like, is that the time? You know what I mean? He's lost track of time entirely. It's just on stage talking and crushing. The whole place is in gales, just tears rolling down their face. He had an innate gift to make the absurdities funny, to make shrewd observations, but not to be self-important about it. Never took himself seriously, had an enormous twinkle in the eye of his that he still has. You watch this documentary, and he's retired down to Florida now, and he's fishing on the dock, and he's kind of cramped up because of Parkinson's disease. But he'll be watching Russell Brand or Elton John or Dustin Hoffman, giving a memory, talking about him, a little tribute, and there'd be just this impish little twinkle. And if something dirty happens, the twinkle gets a little bit brighter. Like, he loved that stuff, man. This is a guy who simply loved life, and it came through in his comedy, and it came through in his demeanor. There is a comment on one of his clips on YouTube where this woman just says, "What a lovely, lovely man." And he is a lovely, lovely man. There's a certain humanity in Billy Connolly's comedy, even if he's talking about fart jokes or sex, something dirty. There's a humanity in it. There's something that you could identify with. And the things that come out of his mouth are just freaking hilarious, man, in a way that not many people can do it. I'm going to recommend that you spend some time this week and you go on YouTube and you look up two specific things, all right? Billy was a regular on the Parkinson Show, which was like a talk show in England, UK, back in the 70s. I don't know how long it ran for, but he was a notorious guest on Parkinson back in the early days. And I know there's an irony in that being called the Parkinson Show. There's two things you got to go look up, all right? His first appearance on Parkinson. This is like an important, dignified talk show in the UK. At a pretty uptight time, man. You know, Monty Python had been breaking down the barriers a little bit. This is the early 70s. And Billy Connolly, probably the most famous / infamous joke he ever told in public, considering the times. Go look up Parkinson. I think it was 1975 or 1974. Just look up Billy Connolly, the wife joke. And it may roll up right after that. Look up Billy Connolly, fart in a spacesuit. I know it sounds silly and childish, and it is. But if you want to laugh today, and you only want to spend 1 minute getting those laughs, look up the wife joke, look up fart in a spacesuit, Billy Connolly, and you can't help but laugh your freaking head off, man. And it's not just the absurdity and the humor of the jokes and the context in which they're delivered, but it's the reactions of the people around him. Laughter is infectious, man. You should try every dang day to get a little bit of laughter into your life, all right? And so, you know, the more people, the better. So if there's a crowd of people laughing, that just feels good. And you will laugh. You have to laugh. So look up Billy Connolly doing that. Billy Connolly live at the Odeon Hammersmith is my favorite special of his from the early 90s. Just do a deep dive on Billy Connolly if you have not done Billy Connolly. And if you are a Billy Connolly fan and you haven't watched It's Been a Pleasure, then go watch that. It's bittersweet, all right? It's not necessarily a feel-good thing, although Billy's happy, you know? Billy is retired, and he's happy with his legacy, and he knows he's got this disease, and he's okay with it, man. You know, that rough and tumble Glaswegian face the world. It's still there. The twinkle is still there. The delight at the absurdity is still there. And you can pull a lot of that into your life, man. I admire people like Billy Connolly, who know who they are, who do their thing and do it well, who trust their innate gift, who have recognized it and used it, you know, who have built a career out of being who they are. I admire the hell out of Billy Connolly for that. And Anthony Bourdain, and that's coming too, by the way, the Anthony Bourdain documentary, and I'm not sure I can handle it. It's a much sadder thing. Tony Bourdain had that too, man. This surety of vision, this faith in his own gift, you know, this courage. Billy Connolly has that. Tony Bourdain has that. And if you want to be inspired and you want to freaking laugh and you want to uncover a man whose joy for life, whose joy in the absurdity, and whose humanity just brought so much happiness to people around the world, go watch Billy Connolly. It's been a pleasure. That's how we used to end every show. People of Glasgow, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You know, it's been a pleasure. Billy, it has been a pleasure. I know you will never hear this, man, but here's a person over in Canada who is touched by your work and legacy and example. That is on YouTube. Go watch it on YouTube and get to know Billy Connolly, man. If you want to laugh, just look up those 2 little moments on Parkinson and laugh at the absurdity of it all, kids. Keep that twinkle in your eyes, all right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, I got to do some music real quick. I am still listed in the Apple directory under music, so let's do a little music. Haven't got a whole lot of new stuff that I've gone deep on this week, but if you're a thrasher, if you're into the heavy stuff, there is a brand new record by Flotsam and Jetsam, kids. Do you know Flotsam and Jetsam? Flotsam and Jetsam's been around since like the early 80s, and they are a thrash band from America. And one of the good ones that went a little bit under the radar, man, but they've been around forever. They've done a lot of records. They just dropped a new one called Blood in the Water, and it is an old school kind of thrash record, man. I can't do the screamo. You know, a lot of the new music has thrash tendencies, those thrash riffs, the drumming is insane, and then the vocals come in and it's that screamo stuff, and it just doesn't work for me. But then when somebody from the 80s, when somebody from the real scene comes along, like a new Megadeth or a new Anthrax or a new Testament or a new Flotsam and Jetsam, I like to go check that out, man, because I like the thrash. Few genres deliver the kind of intensity that thrash does. I haven't gone super deep on Blood in the Water by Flotsam and Jetsam, but it's a good record so far, man. Tons of riffs, some incredible freaking drumming by Ken Mary, and it's just listening to this guy play drums, and I'm like, man, oh man. Like, some people are really freaking good, man. All the double kicks happening, and Eric Knudsen's voice sounds great. Is it Knudsen or Knudsen? Knutsen. Obviously a Viking. Somewhere down the line. Knudsen. I like Knudsen. You know, it sounds volatile. It sounds aggressive. And this is thrash, man. This is old school thrash. Delivered by one of the bands that invented it, man. So it does sound like Megadeth, and it does sound like Anthrax, and it does sound like Testament, and it does sound like Overkill, but it's really good. If you want something heavy and fast and technical with some really cool vocals on it, some amazing freaking drumming, check out the new Flotsam and Jetsam record, Blood in the Water, okay? Now, I'm also going to point you to some friends of mine. Haven't pointed at some friends of mine in a while, but a couple of my friends, 2 different acts, have released new music that I want you to have a listen to, all right? And the first is Yoney. My good friends Costa and Sid, who used to be in the band Bad Reed. If you are in the southwestern Ontario scene, you probably encountered Bad Reed at some point in the last 5 years. It's really great kind of indie rock, soul, funk kind of thing. Hearts played a bunch of shows with Bad Reed. We had a great freaking time. They are great people, great music. And a kind of splinter group off of Bad Reed is Yoney, all right? And that's Sid and Costa the drummer. Really great. And they dropped, I think this is their first official single, came out in the past week or so. That tune is called Let Me In, and it's super cool, man. Sid has one of these really great kind of trippy voices, you know? There's a style of singing that's going on right now that she does really, really well. And this tune has, you know, kind of a Fleetwood Mac vibe happening, and a bit of a disco vibe happening, and a bit of a soul vibe happening. It's a cool freaking tune. It's called Let Me In. You can go hear that on the Spotify. Look up Yoney. That's Yoney. Let Me In. It's a cool track, man. If you're into that kind of vibe, the Fleetwood Mac thing, love me some Fleetwood Mac, man. It's got that kind of a feel to it, all right? With a modern kind of sound. And I dig Yoney, and I dig those people. They're super great. So go give a listen to Yoney. Want you to also go listen to my pals Fresh Breath, all right? That's KT and Josh Pasco. Played with them a couple summers ago on a Sarah Smith show. Really cool place, actually, out in the country. Also southwestern Ontario. These friends have a venue on their property. Out in the country, man. It's like a barn that's converted into a venue, and it's really great. And you can put like 50 or 75 people in there, something like that. Chairs. Nice stage, and the Sarah Band headlined there one night. Fresh Breath played with us. And they're a really cool band, man. You talk about a great singer, KT Pascoe. She's got this edge on her voice, which is really freaking cool. And they're great people as well. And they're a really great band. And they released a new song called World Gone Crazy. And ain't that timely? Hasn't the world gone crazy, man? But the world is coming back into order. And as part of that process, you're beginning to see bands releasing music. And that's why I'm talking about Yoney, and that's why I'm talking about Fresh Breath. Because kudos to them during the pandemic of the past year or more, still knuckling down and getting the music done and recording it, and getting ready to release it now and hopefully getting ready to play some shows. Like the world has gone crazy, but maybe it's coming back to order, man. And the tune World Gone Crazy has got, it's like a folk thing, folk pop, kind of a stompy thing, maybe a bit of a Serena Ryder kind of flair to it, just a little bit. Got this really great guitar hook. It's a cool song, man. But I think you gotta go. I think you can get it on Apple Music, all right? Fresh Breath, World Gone Crazy. You can also go to Bandcamp, and I'm going to do a little plug for Bandcamp right now, okay, kids? Bandcamp is a site where artists can upload their music and you can buy directly from them, all right? And most of the proceeds go back to the artists, all right? Not the platform, not the label, not whoever. They go to the artist. So if you want to really support an artist and buy their work and you can't get to one of their shows to buy a hard copy, go to Bandcamp, all right? And look up the artist and download directly from there. So you can hear the new Fresh Breath single on Bandcamp. Go to bandcamp.com or whatever it is and just type in Fresh Breath. You will see KT and Josh. And they got a bunch of tunes there, one of which is World Gone Crazy. Amongst others, they're a cool band, very cool people, so please go check them out and support them. Go check out Yoney and support Yoney. If you want your skull crushed, go listen to the new Flotsam and Jetsam record, man. And I hope you don't mind me getting a little bit existential today with the advices and the Billy. Sometimes you just gotta drop what's hot. Sometimes you gotta drop what's there to be dropped, man. So don't overthink things. The world is coming back online. You got stuff you want to do, man. Stick in and do it, all right? If you want any advice on getting the podcast off the ground, I might be able to help you. Drop me a line. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you're listening to. Let me know what you're watching. I thought about doing a Q&A episode. Some podcasts do that. That seems like a hip thing to do. So, if you got questions you want me to answer or address or think about, send them to me. And if enough people send in questions that we can do an episode out of, then we'll do that. But either way, drop me a line. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what's going on. Do, please, wherever you listen to this podcast, drop me just a little rating and review, preferably a positive one. Definitely helps the show, and I definitely appreciate you doing it. Gonna shutting up, and get out of here right now. Until next time, hey kids, enjoy the Euros, and I'll check you later. Thank you once again, gentle listener, for taking in today's show. If you want to know more about the program, go to www.john-huff.com. That's JOHN-HUFF.com and click on podcast. You can also find the show on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. If you're an Instagram person, you can find me at JW_Huff. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me at JWSHuff. No matter where you listen to the show, please do me a big, big favor and leave a rating and review. Preferably a positive one. That's all the time we have for today, but I'll be back very soon. Until then, keep your wits about you, and remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. Bye for now. Habs are up 3-0 on Winnipeg at the time of this recording. Could this team actually go all the way?